Hey, what's up? In this video, I'm gonna show you how I took hours of footage and condensed it down into a 1-hour documentary. If you're new here, my name's Jake Hill. I help you make better videos for your church. And if you're interested in church videography, you should definitely check out the link down in the description. If you wanna view the final result of this project that I'm gonna be talking about today, you can also view that down in the description below. I'll link that video. But I'm basically going to walk through 6 easy to understand steps in how I assembled, cut, organized, and basically edited this documentary. So I'm going to start off with number 1. So my first step whenever I'm editing any video, but especially this one, is going to come down to actually getting our file structure in order. And I kind of walk through my typical things that I do whenever I do that in Finder and organize all these files on my hard drive. But this is pretty similar per project. Sometimes there's more or less folders, obviously, but right here at the top, I have an export folder, and this just contains basically anything that I export out of DaVinci Resolve is going to be in here. So even the trailer, this is the final video, different versions, the 4K, the master, the ProRes version. So that's pretty much my export. I always put an underscore at the beginning just because I always want that to be at the very top of the folder. That's really all that is. And then all these clips right here, or all these folders, are all of our footage folders. So this is by the date, so May 21st, May 22nd, and so on. And then our A-roll set 1 and 2. I didn't have dates on those because those are pretty specific, but this is all the footage that we captured essentially. And then commentary, this is a whole nother video that we produced. There was basically one of the pastors on stage, like kind of giving an intro and an outro to this film the night that it premiered at our church. So this is the footage from that. Frames, this is really just a couple frames I grabbed from for some thumbnails on YouTube and stuff like that. The final backup is a DaVinci Resolve project file. I kind of exported this from DaVinci just in case something happened to my computer. So I always had a backup project file since DaVinci stores them in your database. Graphic kind of contains the title graphics and stuff like that from our designer at church who absolutely killed it. And then individual content, this was content that was submitted by the guys. Anyway, I don't need to walk through every single folder in here. Clearly there's music, but on it, my biggest tip would be to get this folder structure right, because the process for editing this documentary would have been a pain if all of the footage was just dumped into one single folder and then I was trying to export it and I don't know where the export went, and I have the graphic, but it's also in Dropbox. Just knowing where everything is, even if it's not the most organized it could be, these all could probably be in a source or footage folder, but it makes enough sense for me. So getting that organized at the start, because this is going to mimic a lot of when we bring it into DaVinci Resolve, the structure in there as well. Also, side note, you can see total, we're at 1.9 terabytes, which may not be a lot to some people, but it's a pretty significant project. After I have that all organized, I bring it all into here and import it. And then my main step, number 2, is syncing all the multicam, because especially with this, our A-roll set had a lot of cameras, 6 at least. And so getting all those synced in a single multicam sequence is essential. A lot of this, was really built around a one main interview section. So we basically sat down with all 5 of the guys that are in this documentary, and we just asked them questions. So a lot of it is built around this one scene, as well as some other A-roll and B-roll from other points in time, but this is kind of the grounding interview for it. So this right here, this is my multicam sequence. So this is what I'm dropping into another timeline, which we'll get to next. But you can see here, this is just wild. So these are recordings from the lav mic and the boom mic right here. And then these are all of our cameras, plus kind of a roaming camera that we had going around. I kind of synced up some here, but I ended up just bringing those in when I needed it. And so this is a beast of a multicam. This thing is over 4 hours long, which is wild. So we had that one. We had another one, which is them eating lunch, and they're kind of sharing stories with each other. So this was much more basic, just one take. So as I go through this process, I typically will cut out these gaps, and the couple times when I'm hitting record on each of the cameras. Like I don't need this extra time in here. I usually like to like clean cut every angle at the same point so I know it's all lined up. But I decided to just leave it for this project because I never really knew if there was a good audio clip that I'd want to bring in or actually use that I otherwise might have cut out. So I kind of left it pretty bare bones in here, just synced up. And then I did all the cutting in the next step, which is step 3. So this is actually what I'm going to call the cutting step. What I did from there is bring this into a new timeline. And you can see there's a lot of markers. So in this step, in the cutting step, I'm really cutting out parts that I know I'm not going to use, things that are redundant. I'm adding a ton of markers. I initially went with timeline markers. So I'm just adding markers up here. But then I realized once you start like moving clips around, obviously the timeline markers don't follow, so I ended up having to copy them down into clip markers. So they're all pretty much duplicated onto the individual clips so they carry over when I start dragging everything around to reassemble the story. But that's really what this step is you're sorting through the footage, especially with this one, which is based around this single interview pretty much. So just making notes. I mean, any of these markers are kind of color coordinated. Red is basically like I might cut it out, could be removed. Green is a great portion, and a lot of these little green clips are what made it into like the teaser trailer. Good little like one liners, couple sentences that really like encapsulate each of their stories. Pink and blue are both kind of just markers in time for what's happening, what they're talking about. And then purple is a lot of like B-roll. So along with this step, really what I'm doing right here is cutting out things that I know I'm not gonna need. So once I have had this timeline in a pretty good spot, what I did is I duplicated the timeline, which I'll talk about here in just a second. And I just name them with numbers, but I made another one. And what I did in this timeline is actually rearranged the whole story because initially, obviously we had each guy tell their story. So they're basically back to back, organized by guy, but we wanted the final end product to kind of weave their stories in, so they're each talking about kind of how they found themselves in a rut, and then the middle is all of them talking about how they kind of realized they needed freedom, and then the end is actually finding that freedom and how they've found freedom. So that kind of weaves all their stories in at the beginning, in the middle, and the end. They're all kind of intermixed. So that's what I did in this sequence here in the cut sequence, was I actually took all their portions of speaking and rearranged it into like 3, what do I call it? Kind of 3 chapters, if you will. So this is like, that's the ending over here, but I have like 1, well, that should be 2, but this right here is 2, and then this one over here should really be 1, and then this should be 3. So kind of 3 chapters of what I just mentioned. And so there's each guy here kind of just with a gap in between to show that there's a different guy talking at this time. So that was basically step number 4, and I know that's a little specific to this project, but was really kind of rearranging all the A-roll and also kind of bringing in a lot of these other A-roll portions like Forrest and Megan and some of their like some of the guys' spouses, some of the guys' wives bringing in as well, and Dante's talking here. So getting everything on the timeline again, but really making sure that the story is assembled in the order that we're really wanting it to be. And that leads into step number 5, which is versioning each timeline. I'm sure you can see I have a bunch of these timelines up here, and even how I went from review, which is just a dump of the footage and organizing all my thoughts on it, and then free 3 cut. So that's kind of how I'll version out the timelines, is I'll add a number so I know it's going to be in order clearly, and then I'll kind of add a descriptor. So here I'm like cutting out stuff, and I also rearrange the story. It's a little more of an assembly cut. And then in 4, I cut out a little more, and then on 5, this is a pretty significant one. But I kind of do that because I never know if I might cut something out, and I actually wanted that. So if I'm just doing this in one timeline and then I'm like, dang, I cut that part out, I don't even remember where it was, like it would be a huge pain to go back and try and find it out of the raw footage. So I kind of keep, whenever I change something significantly, I'll just duplicate the timeline and kind of version it out. So this would, you could kind of say, is version 4. And then getting into here, this is definitely getting among the final cut. So obviously there's a lot of extra footage here at the end, but you can tell we have B-roll we're bringing in. I brought in a few like adjustment layers just to test out some color in this stage. Some of it is totally different, some worked, some didn't. But I did that in adjustment clips, which I didn't do in the final color, but I did it in adjustment clips here because it was easy to just drag around and see how that looks on different footage. And then the very last step, you can kind of tell that I did it here, but is really just filling in all the gaps. So here, especially in this assembly cut, I added B-roll, I added other A-roll that wasn't in the primary interview. So there's a couple other portions here. Forrest's fiance, now wife, is kind of talking about her perspective, which is great to add in. So we had that interview from her. So I'm adding in things like that wherever they fit, which is kind of why I have them all thrown here towards the end. So I actually like found that portion, cut it out, and pasted it back over here with them. So that's kind of how I like to work. I don't like to work out of the media pool very much. I like to have everything on the timeline, and that way if I cut this out, I can see what I've already used and drag clips around. And sometimes I pull it over here and I don't actually end up using it, so then I'll just drag it off to the end. So you can tell there's a lot of stuff that hasn't been used, and I'll just go through my other sequences. This one is also pretty significant. And then here I got some feedback from people, so that's free 7 feedback export, and this is what I actually exported to get some feedback from some other people and get their thoughts on it. And then post feedback, I like made those adjustments, and this one's getting really close to the final export. I kind of separated out all the audio and dialogue, which I will talk about in another video where I kind of break down the audio mix and how I did that. But all these are in the old timelines, which I like to do once I wrap the project, because I don't want to have all these mixed in with my actual final timelines, because this free one right here is the actual final export. I'll show you this timeline real quick. So there's a lot of audio tracks clearly and a lot of video tracks, but I did my best to really organize all these, even label the video tracks and audio, a lot of music. But that's kind of the final piece. So that's kind of a broad overview of my process. With a project of this size, I feel like I really had to make sure my process was really dialed in, because just of the magnitude of this project and having a full hour final export was pretty significant. So I knew I needed to have my process like really dialed in, and I didn't want to get halfway through this edit and realize that I kind of needed my older timelines because I wasn't versioning, or my files weren't organized in Finder, so I needed to redo that. So it was a good project to make sure that my editing process worked really well, and I feel like it held up, which is good. So it was cool to work on this, and also to realize that a lot of the processes that I built up by doing these smaller projects really matter. So that's kind of what I'd encourage you to don't skip out on, is keeping organized, making sure your editing process is really nailed down, even if you just have really small project, because eventually whenever something like this comes along that's a lot bigger, that's where it really kind of gets put to the test. So thanks for watching. I'd love to make some more content around this video. I know I'm going to cover the audio mix as well as the color, but if you have any other questions, let me know down in the comments, and hopefully this was helpful. See you in the next one.